Hello everyone, Jeff with a Green Review. I need to replace a pear tree. The previous pear in this spot only lasted a year. The tree was originally planted in the fall, and then the following spring it started displaying symptoms of fire blight. It didn't even bloom. And that's important because bees transfer the fire blight bacteria from tree to tree. And I don't know how this tree developed fire blight, but it had fire blight. I tried cutting down lower on the trunk and removing some of the branches and stuff, and that didn't help, so eventually the tree had to be removed. Now I need a new tree. Well, I like another pear, but it needs to be resistant to fire blight. I already have a fire blight resistant pear, Summer Crisp, right over just a few feet away from here, and it is a self-fertile tree, so it will produce its own fruit, but it does better if there's another tree close by that can be a pollinator. So I've chosen Kiefer pear, this one, because it is resistant to fire blight, and it is also self-fertile, but will do better if there's another tree nearby. The Kiefer pear was discovered in the 1850-1870s time frame by Peter Kiefer in the Philadelphia area. He was a nurseryman who had imported Asian pears and European pears, and this was a natural cross that he discovered accidentally, and it turns out to have very good fruit and very good fire blight resistance. When choosing a new fruit tree, there's a few things you need to look for. First, you need to look to see where the graft union is. The tree was grafted so that you can have the same kind of fruit as the original tree. So there will be a graft union at some point on the tree trunk, and you need to look to see if the scion and the rootstock are healing together properly. And if there's a stub left over, you'll need to prune that out. On this tree, it's right down here at the base. You'll often find a short stub left from the original rootstock's tree trunk. This will need to be pruned off flush because dead stuff decays, and we don't want that dead material left on the tree trunk where it can rot out through the center of the tree. We want this to be flush so that it can heal over quickly. Second, the tree trunk will often be pruned so the tree will sprout branches below that location. A bushier tree sells better than a tall single trunk. But the dead stub that was left, again, will need to be pruned off to flush so that we have a good healing spot. And the other branches that have been pruned will also need to be checked to make sure that they don't have any stubs left where the internode is dying back. We want to prune back to nodes and where buds are so that we can get proper growth. We want to make sure that all of the stubs have been removed. Make sure that the branches that are coming out from where that pruning cut was are going in the right directions. We want on pears and apples to have the branches evenly spaced vertically up the trunk and around the trunk so that we can have one branch growing to that side, one to this side, one to this side, and spread around. On pear trees, a lot of times they will try to send up a branch to make a new trunk. We're going to want to spread those out to make a better branching angle so we don't have a problem with two trunks growing too close together and dead stuff decaying in between them or splitting apart if there's a storm. So this one branch will have to come out a little bit better, and we have one small branch here that will prune out completely because it's growing in a direction we don't need or want and it's crossing through the middle. But the rest of the branches, all the bigger ones, are growing in a nice even spacing up and down and an even spacing around the tree. And with a little bit of training, we'll be able to get them to be exactly where we want them to be. The third thing to check is make sure the trunk is straight and that one of the branches, especially on pear trees that grow vertical, that they haven't taken over and tried becoming the new trunk and coming out sideways and then turning up some kind of an odd shaped trunk. You want to make sure you have a nice good straight trunk. And then the top of the trunk, you want to check to make sure that it hasn't been broken. There's a lot of times people, carrying the tree around and the top gets hit something and it breaks. And in this case, we have some dead leaves at the top because there's a branch that's been broken off the top. And that's okay in this case because this is about the height that I wanted to make this tree in the first place, and so I can do some pruning here and make this tree the height that I want it to be and not have any problems. But just make sure you check the top of the tree. It's so high, a lot of people never look up there to see what they've got. And so in this case, I've taken off a few inches and I've got the tree that I want. The next step is planting. Before planting, wash the roots off. The plant may have been grown in a pot, and so all the roots are circling around. And so you need to be straightened out and moved out of into the hole in a better pattern than circling around and around. The plant may have been grown in the field and only recently put into a pot, and so roots like this one were chopped off. New branches are off, the roots are growing, but again, there might be some damage, might be something that needs to be pruned, straightened, set into the right place, rather than letting them stay in the spot of what the pot was. And then also, you might find, like in this case, the roots are one-sided. This side has hardly any roots, this side has got a lot, and maybe some of these can be moved around so that we can have roots growing in all directions instead of just having a lopsided root system on one side. You only get one chance to fix this, and this is the time to do it. And the best way to do it is to wash off the roots so that you can see what you have and see what needs to be done on a remedial basis. Dig a hole wide enough and deep enough for the roots. So if you've got some roots that can be spread out, then go ahead and spread them out. Put them as far out as you can so that they can grow in a much wider area right off the bat. This will help with any kind of drought situation where the water is going to be in a much wider area out here than if you were just to make a small hole. Don't just stuff the roots in the hole. Also, make sure that the tree is in the ground deep enough. A lot of people plant their roots or the trees too high or too low. It should be right at the level that it was in the soil, it was in the nursery. Not necessarily what it is in a pot or in a balled and burlap situation where maybe more soil was added to it. But look for discolorations and changes in the bark color so that you can get it at the right level. Get all the roots in. There's going to be a root flare eventually as the roots grow out. The trunk will be wider at that point. We want that to be visible. We don't want it to be like a telephone pole just stuffed into the ground. You don't need fertilizer, and you don't need special potting soil or planting soil because the roots are supposed to get out of this hole as quickly as possible, not be stuck in the hole in a situation where they may be enticed to kind of stay there because the soil conditions are good. If the soil is not appropriate for the tree and you have to add something to it or plant it too high, then it's not the right tree for that location. And trying to change those things are not going to help because we don't want the roots to be in an area this big. We want the roots to be out much, much farther. So making a special soil in the hole does not help. And a lot of times fertilizer can burn all those tender roots that are there. So we don't want to do anything that'll affect them. Fertilizing later is appropriate, but not right now when you're planting. All right, and now we need to just water this in and get the soil down in between some of those roots that it may be sitting on top of. Work all the air bubbles out. And now that we've got it watered, we can add the mulch. properly planted tree in good soil with a good root system probably doesn't need to be staked. Occasionally with a small root system and a large top, especially in the summer when there's a lot of leaves on the trees, then before the roots can get established, you might have a kind of a sail effect here, and you might have some trees that blow over. So in that case, you might want to do some tying them up. In this case, we have a pole here for grapevines that hasn't been used, and so we're going to just anchor this tree gently to there. We don't want to anchor them tightly in place, because then they don't get their own strength. They depend on the strength of the ties, and they will not grow very well. And so when you take the ties off, their trunk is too weak. You want them to be able to blow around in several inches in every direction. So this is a Zipit Tree Tie. It's a reusable tree tie. It's a really nice brand that you should look into. And it's very easy to install and very easy to adjust the size that you want. It has an extra rubber hose on the outside of it that slides. No, it doesn't slide. All right, there it goes. It slides just like it was supposed to. User error, as they say. Okay, so here we go again. All right, that's much better. This will keep the tree from blowing over, and yet it'll still allow the tree to flex enough to be able to get its own strength. And that's all it takes to purchasing and planting a tree. This has been a Greener View. Thanks for watching.